Susan Miller thought she was saving 17-year-old Omar by opening her Ohio home to him. But what she didn't know was that Omar, along with his hidden partner Farid, had turned her kindness into the perfect cover for a love scam that would shatter lives and drain victims of their trust and money. Susan Miller had spent most of her adult life in the same quiet Ohio neighborhood, raising her daughter and building a modest but comfortable home. After her husband's sudden death 3 years earlier, loneliness often crept into her days, though she tried to keep busy with work, church, and volunteering. When she heard about the chance to host a foreign exchange student, she thought it might be the perfect way to bring new life into her home. It felt like an opportunity not only to help a young person in need, but also to heal her own sense of loss. The program connected her with a 17-year-old boy named Omar, who had recently arrived from Afghanistan. From the first moment she saw him at the airport, standing nervously with a single worn bag, Susan felt both protective and curious. He was tall and thin, with a quiet manner that seemed polite but guarded. His dark eyes scanned the crowd as if he expected danger at any moment, and yet when Susan waved to him, he smiled faintly and nodded with gratitude. Back at her home, she prepared a warm meal and showed him the room she had carefully decorated with new sheets, a desk lamp, and bookshelves filled with English novels. Omar thanked her softly and seemed overwhelmed by the kindness. To the neighbors who stopped by later that week, Susan proudly introduced him as if he were already family. Many praised her generosity, saying it took courage to open her home in such a way. But Susan noticed small things others overlooked: the way Omar avoided direct questions, how he clutched his phone tightly, and how his smile never fully reached his eyes. She dismissed her unease, telling herself trust would grow with time. The first few weeks with Omar felt almost too perfect. Susan poured her energy into making him feel welcome, cooking hearty dinners, driving him to school, and even showing him around the small town. He adapted quickly, learning routines and quietly helping with chores. The neighbors often saw them walking together, and many remarked how lucky Omar was to have landed in such a kind home. To Susan, it felt as though she had found a new purpose. Having someone to care for filled a void that grief had carved in her life. Emily, Susan's 16-year-old niece, visited often. She was fascinated by Omar's background and wanted to hear about life in Afghanistan, though his answers were short and vague. Still, she liked spending time with him and found his quietness intriguing. The two became fast companions, often sitting together with music or scrolling through videos. Susan found comfort in seeing them bond. She thought it was a healthy friendship and a sign Omar was adjusting. In photographs, Omar looked like any other American teenager. He smiled at community gatherings, posed during school events, and seemed eager to fit in. Susan proudly shared these moments online, telling friends how rewarding it was to host a student from such a different world. Yet behind those carefully crafted images, small peculiarities began to surface. Omar never left his phone unattended, locking it tightly even when charging. He grew visibly tense whenever a notification buzzed. Sometimes, Susan caught him staring at his screen late into the night, his expression unreadable. Though she brushed it aside as normal teenage behavior, the unease from before lingered. The boy she welcomed so warmly seemed to carry an invisible weight, something hidden beneath the polished surface of his new life. One evening, long after Susan had gone to bed, she woke to the sound of the back door clicking shut. Her heart jumped, and she moved quietly to the window. In the dim glow of the porch light, she spotted Omar pacing across the backyard with his phone pressed tightly to his ear. His voice was low and hurried, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. His shoulders were stiff, and he kept glancing toward the house as though afraid someone might be watching. After several minutes, he slipped back inside, careful to close the door without a sound. Susan returned to bed unsettled, telling herself not to overthink. Still, the image of his nervous movements replayed in her mind. Over the next week, similar nights followed. Omar would disappear outside or into the garage, whispering into his phone for long stretches of time. When Susan asked casually about his family, hoping for a glimpse into his world, his answers were short and vague. He said little about his parents or siblings, claiming they were far away and communication was difficult. Susan tried to accept his privacy, but the more he avoided her questions, the more her unease deepened. Emily began noticing things too. One afternoon, while sitting near him, she caught sight of messages popping up on his phone. The names didn't look familiar, and the words disappeared almost instantly after being read. When she asked who it was, Omar quickly locked the screen and changed the subject. His reaction was sharp enough to make her uncomfortable, though she kept her thoughts to herself at first. For Susan and Emily, the sense that Omar was hiding something became harder to ignore. What had once seemed like ordinary teenage secrecy now carried the weight of something far more troubling. On a quiet Saturday morning, Susan carried a basket of laundry into Omar's room. She respected his privacy but wanted to keep things tidy, especially since he often left clothes piled on the floor. As she sorted through his jeans, a small piece of folded paper slipped from a pocket and fell onto the carpet. Curious, she picked it up. It wasn't a note from school or a crumpled receipt from a local store. Her breath caught when she unfolded it and saw the familiar yellow logo of Western Union. The receipt showed a money transfer, hundreds of dollars sent overseas, far more than a teenager could possibly afford. Susan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the paper in disbelief. She had been giving Omar a small allowance for lunch and school supplies, just enough to get by. Where could he have gotten such a large sum? The questions rushed through her mind. Was he working secretly, borrowing from someone, or involved in something illegal? The thought of criminal activity inside her home made her stomach tighten. For the rest of the day, she carried the receipt in her apron pocket, unsure of what to do. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers. But another part hesitated, afraid of pushing him away or sparking conflict. She reminded herself that he was only 17, a boy far from home, maybe just trying to help his family. Yet the numbers on the receipt told a different story, one that couldn't be brushed aside so easily. When Omar came downstairs later, calm and collected as ever, Susan studied his face for signs of guilt. But his guarded expression revealed nothing. The secret lay buried, leaving her with a growing unease she could no longer ignore. Emily's curiosity soon turned into determination. She couldn't stop thinking about the strange names she had glimpsed on Omar's phone, names that appeared and vanished in seconds. One evening, when Omar was distracted in another room, she opened her laptop and began to search online. Using fragments she remembered, usernames, email handles, and initials, she pieced together a digital trail. What she uncovered made her pulse quicken. Omar had multiple social media profiles, each carefully crafted but far from truthful. On one account, he posed as a clean-cut young American college student, using stolen photos of a blonde-haired athlete. On another, he claimed to be a soldier stationed overseas, posting romantic quotes and promises of loyalty. Each page had a different name, but the same style of messages, declarations of love, sweet words designed to pull someone closer, and requests for trust. Scrolling through comment sections and private groups, Emily realized these weren't just empty accounts. Real women were interacting with him, pouring their hearts out to the man they thought was real. Their comments were filled with hope, longing, and affection. Some posted about sacrifices they were making to be together soon. The pit in Emily's stomach grew heavier. She dug further, connecting one profile to another. Patterns emerged, similar phrases, reused photos, and overlapping contacts. It was a web of lies, a system meant to lure vulnerable women into believing in a fantasy. Emily's hands trembled as she closed the laptop, overwhelmed by the realization. Omar wasn't just hiding a little secret. He was running a deception that reached far beyond Susan's home. When she shared the discovery with Susan, fear replaced the sympathy they once felt. The boy they had welcomed so warmly was living a double life, one built on manipulation and stolen trust. As Susan and Emily dug deeper, the scale of Omar's secret began to unfold in shocking detail. What Emily had first thought were just a few fake profiles turned out to be dozens, each targeting different women from across the country. By searching forums and private groups linked to his accounts, they found threads of conversations filled with promises of marriage, dreams of building a life together, and pleas for financial help. The tone was always the same, affectionate, persuasive, and manipulative. It soon became clear that these women believed they were in genuine relationships. Some of them had been sending money regularly, small amounts that quickly added up. Others had emptied savings, convinced they were helping a man they loved achieve a better future. One profile even included screenshots of airplane tickets, supposedly proof of upcoming visits that never happened. The lies were carefully woven, designed to keep hope alive while draining wallets. Susan's heart ached as she read through the posts. She imagined these women sitting in their homes, clinging to the fantasy that someone far away cared deeply for them. They weren't strangers anymore. They were victims. And Omar, the boy eating at her table and sleeping under her roof, was the one behind it all. For Emily, the discovery felt surreal. She had once thought of Omar as mysterious, maybe even misunderstood, but now she saw him differently. His charm was calculated, his quietness a mask to hide the schemes he ran in secret. The Western Union receipt made perfect sense now. The money wasn't an innocent transfer to family in need. It was stolen from lonely hearts across the internet. Realizing that her home had become the center of a love scam left Susan shaken to her core. The tension in Susan's house grew heavier by the day. She wanted to believe Omar was just a misguided teenager caught in something he didn't fully understand, but new evidence painted a darker picture. Her fears were confirmed when she noticed her wallet sitting slightly out of place on the kitchen counter. At first, she brushed it off, thinking she had misplaced it. But 2 days later, when she logged into her online banking, her stomach dropped. Several unauthorized purchases appeared: electronics, gift cards, and online services. The amounts weren't huge at first, but together they totaled more than she could afford to lose. Her mind raced. She had always kept her card in her purse, tucked away in a drawer. The only other person with access was Omar. The realization felt like a betrayal cutting deeper than the scams she and Emily had already uncovered. Now, it wasn't just strangers who were suffering. He was targeting her, the very person who had opened her home and offered him kindness. Susan didn't say anything right away. She moved through the day in silence, her eyes sharper, her ears tuned to every sound Omar made. He acted calm, almost too calm, eating dinner and scrolling through his phone without a care. But his stillness now looked like strategy rather than innocence. That night, Susan sat awake in bed, her mind torn between fear and anger. What if she confronted him and he lashed out? What if his secrets stretched even further, into something more dangerous than stolen money? The boy under her roof no longer felt like a guest. He felt like a stranger she couldn't trust, a stranger with access to every corner of her life. The safe home she had built now felt fragile, even threatened. Emily's digging didn't stop after discovering the fake profiles. She began looking into the messages more carefully, tracing usernames and email handles linked to Omar's online activity. One evening, while scrolling through a forum connected to his scam accounts, she stumbled across a chilling exchange. The messages weren't between Omar and the women he targeted, but between him and another young man. The tone was different, less affectionate, more strategic. They were discussing money transfers, stolen card numbers, and tactics to keep victims hooked. The other name was Farid, a 19-year-old living in another state. His profile picture showed a confident face, and his words carried authority. It became clear he was more than a friend. He was a mentor. Omar seemed to be reporting back to him, following instructions on how to approach new victims, what lines to use, and how to avoid detection. Every move Omar made inside Susan's house had been carefully directed by this unseen partner. Reading those exchanges sent shivers down Emily's spine. Omar wasn't a lonely teenager stumbling into bad decisions. He was part of a network. Susan, horrified by the evidence, began to see the bigger picture. Her home had unknowingly become the base for a fraudulent operation stretching across state lines. What scared her most was Farid's influence. The messages showed him encouraging Omar to push harder, to demand more money from victims, and even to exploit the trust of people close to him. Susan couldn't help but wonder if she and Emily had already been part of his plan all along. The thought that Omar wasn't acting alone deepened her fear. It wasn't just one boy hiding secrets. It was a partnership fueled by manipulation, greed, and a growing sense of danger closing in around them. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening when Susan returned from work to find Emily pale and shaken in the living room. Her niece's hands trembled as she recounted what had just happened. Omar had cornered her in the hallway, his voice low but threatening. He warned her that if she kept digging into his business, people could get hurt. The coldness in his tone was unlike anything she had heard before. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't the voice of a scared teenager. It was the voice of someone protecting a secret at any cost. Susan felt her stomach twist with dread. She had tolerated the unease for weeks, convincing herself that Omar might change, that she could guide him in the right direction. But now the danger was no longer abstract. It was inside her house, pressing against her family, and it left her no choice. She gathered the evidence they had collected, the Western Union receipt, the screenshots of profiles, the online messages pointing to Farid. Together, they formed a chilling map of deceit and theft. With trembling hands, Susan called the local police, her voice steady but urgent as she explained everything. When detectives arrived, they listened carefully, their expressions tightening as they scrolled through the proof. They had seen scams like this before, but the detail and reach of Omar's activities surprised even them. They assured Susan that she had done the right thing, but the knowledge did little to calm her nerves. That night, the air inside the house was tense and heavy. Omar remained in his room, oblivious to the fact that his world was unraveling. For Susan and Emily, the decision had been made. Silence was no longer an option. The secret would finally be exposed. The arrest came swiftly, as if the tension that had built for weeks finally snapped. Early one morning, flashing lights cut through the quiet of the street. Police officers approached the house with firm steps, their radios crackling as Susan and Emily watched from the window. Omar was taken from his room still groggy, his hands cuffed behind his back. For the first time since he arrived, the mask of calm had fallen away. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. Within days, Farid was tracked down in another state. Investigators uncovered a wide web of victims, dozens of women scattered across the country, all lured by promises of love and companionship. Some had lost only a few $100s, but others had sent life savings. The total loss climbed past $200,000, each dollar representing broken trust and shattered dreams. Susan sat with detectives as they explained the scale of the fraud. The evidence she and Emily had provided had been the key to unraveling it all. Relief washed over her, but so did sorrow. She had wanted to give a boy a chance at a new life, to offer kindness in a world often short of it. Instead, her home had been used as a base for deception. For Emily, the experience was a harsh lesson in appearances. The quiet, guarded teen she once thought was mysterious had turned out to be part of something far more dangerous than she imagined. When the trial concluded, Omar and Farid were both sentenced for fraud and identity theft. Justice had been served, but the damage lingered. Susan's trust had been shaken, her good intentions exploited. What began as an act of compassion ended as a chilling reminder of how well secrets can hide in plain sight.